Hey friends, in this video we're going to talk about the pain that comes from often living life and trying to co-create in life with others, and a few ways that we can deal with that pain, bring resolution to that pain, and have better relationships with other people. Now, I'm not talking about in this video things that might relate to like really damaged relationships that you might have with other people. All right, this is kind of assuming that you've got at least a semi-healthy relationship with someone else, that this is just kind of like the pain and struggles that come from living life with other people. If it has to do with like deep pain or deep broken relationships with other people, what we're going to talk about in this video could help you. Like, it might be able to help you resolve some of that pain and get to where you need to go. But I think there could be a lot more work to do in a situation like that. And that could be a topic of a whole other video. But for this video, we're going to talk about the pain, the suffering that arises from people just kind of like in day-to-day life, struggles that happen with people you love, coworkers, friends, acquaintances, like your children, a spouse, whatever, like those kinds of just kind of day-to-day situations. So I've got a lot of notes here. I made a lot of notes for this one, so I'm gonna have to like look down and refer to my notes as we go along here. So I think to start off with, to define a little bit like what we're talking about, the space, like living and like what that means, like living with other people. I really think that living with other people means that you are co-creating. You know, I mentioned that at the beginning when I first started in the video here, but co-creating, I think, happens, like that's what life is. When you live with people, you are trying to co-create life with them. Everybody's got their own vision of what they want to have happen in their day, their own likes and dislikes. And so when you live life with other people, it's almost like a dance. It's almost like this thing where you're trying to co-create with people, bring things into being. And when you begin to realize that, you can start to frame and make sense out of the world when you view it that way, and know that that's the path. I'd say that when you deal with pain of trying to co-create and live life with another person, again, whether that's a child, parent, spouse, coworker, whatever it is, often that is what I would call a tempo problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is give you this kind of like frame, a mental model, a way to look at the world, a lens to look through, a way to kind of make sense of it so you can start to orient. And after we talk about that, I'm going to give you two resources for you to be able to like start to put some stuff into practice on how you can deal with this. So the frame that I want to look at life through and suggest that you begin to look at life through is that the interaction and life with other people is that it's often tempo issues. So okay, so let's unpack some of those. Let's talk about some of those. So first, realize that we all live life with a tempo. We all have rhythm to our days. We all have a certain speed that we move through life with. And that ranges for every person. It differs for you based on your environment, what's going on, the stress you have, the things that you're trying to accomplish. And we all just kind of inherently have a sense of tempo and a sense of which we must move through life to get things done, to do what we want to do and live. All right, so maybe a classic one that parents, if you're a parent, that you might relate to is waking up your child in the morning. So, or perhaps you could relate as perhaps a teenager once upon a time that you might have had a very different tempo in the morning than a parent that was trying to wake you up. And so when you encounter these two different tempos, you have the parent and you have the child, it's highly likely that the parent is already up, has a tempo in their day, and they're ready to get going. Let's go. There's a fast tempo. And the child that's in bed doesn't want to get up yet, has a very slow tempo. that teenager that wants to sleep in, very slow tempo. I mean, when somebody's asleep, that's about as slow a tempo as you can get, maybe other than being dead, but then you're not alive. So anyway, all right, so tempo, you see that interaction between fast tempo and then this very slow tempo of a child wanting to sleep in. What happens when those tempos come together? Oftentimes, it's not great. You have some problems, right? So when you begin to see it through that lens, you can begin to now put some tools into place. You can start to deal with that. And so let's work through some of that. So one is to realize that both people in those situations are beings of infinite worth that have their own way of viewing the world. They have their own tempo. So when you begin to realize that, you can say, okay, this is the situation that I'm in. You can still have direction, so you can still lead, even with different tempos. So in the situation, the example that I gave you with the parent waking up a child, the parent can still come in with leadership, with direction, vision for the day, and say, let's get going. Let's here's what we're going to go do. But to realize, though, that it's, again, more of a dance. You have to come in. You might want to slow down your tempo. You might want to slow down, take a moment, and begin to wake up that child or slow down with them to be able to match their tempo and then bring them to yours. This requires some patience. It requires some empathy. So empathy is another piece of this. Empathy is a gift that we as humans have, an amazing, powerful gift to be able to look at someone else. So empathy allows you to look at someone else and realize and imagine their state. So like that's the power. I mean, it is an amazing power when you think about it, is that we can look at someone, we can observe them, and kind of bring that into our own minds and into our own beings and be able to kind of model that and then relate to them and empathize with them. So you can look at someone that has a slower tempo than you, empathize with them, realize that, and suddenly orient your whole tempo, your tempo, and everything in your life to that, to then be able to guide and move on. So use empathy. So empathy will require you to slow down. Like it will require you to shift your mind and shift your state of being. But empathy is a powerful tool to do this. So what happens when you have two different people of two different tempos, and you come into interaction and you try to force someone else into your tempo? It can be problematic. It just gets not so great. So resistance is what tends to happen. Resistance is one of those things. The other thing could be resentment. And so what happens when you have a person that will maybe comply with your tempo changes, not vocalize it, just kind of get in there and go, resentment can happen. Which nobody wants resentment. That's not great. The other thing could be resistance. Resistance can happen to your tempo changes. So when you come into a situation with another person and try to co-create with them, try to live life with them, and your tempo is too fast, you can freak them the hell out. Like you can really scare people, because tempo changes, when you try to change tempo really quickly, one of the things that can do is it can cause confusion, it can cause fear to well up in people, it can scare people. On the other hand, if you try to come in with a very slow tempo, it can bore people, and they can resist that because they don't want to be bored. They have their fast tempo, they're doing their things. So you have to be able to use, again, empathy. So to recap a lot of this stuff here, you can look at the interactions you have with other people through this lens of tempo. Look at the tempo you have, look at the tempo they have, the way at which you're living life. Recognize that and realize that a lot of the problems that occur are because we're not recognizing tempo changes in ourselves and others, and we're trying to move people along, trying to move people into our ways of thinking, into our ways of living, and they're in a completely different mood, dance, emotion, rhythm, everything else. Totally different. So this isn't the only way. This is not the only way to look at lenses of relationships and working with people, but I think that this is a really helpful way, really useful way of doing it. All right, so let's talk about some tools. So some tools you can use to engage with others, to be able to do this dance, to be able to co-create, live life with others, to start to transcend the pain and make some changes that may be in existence with people you love and people that you want to have relationships with. All right, so what are some tools that we can use to be able to, in the moment, when things aren't easy, in the moment, when it's hard, when tempo just doesn't snap into place, sometimes it's like people come together, it's like, this is easy, and we just kind of flow. When that happens, that's great. All right, so but what are some tools that you can use when that doesn't happen? When you come together, you try to come together, have tempo, and it's like, pain happens, okay? So the first one is a book called On Dialogue. Phenomenal book called On Dialogue by a guy named David Bohm. He was a physicist. Phenomenal book. It's a quick read. It's small. On Dialogue. The second one is another book called Nonviolent Communication by a guy named Marshall Rosenberg. Kind of blanked there for a second. Marshall Rosenberg. These are phenomenal books when it comes to this topic. They are amazing. So a couple concepts from these that you would find helpful. So first, from On Dialogue, and by the way, these resources, I mean, they're hugely rich in themselves, so I cannot possibly cover all of them right now. Can't even remember all of it, but a couple highlights from them. So from On Dialogue, this tool, first tool of dialogue. So dialogue, what that means is the etymology of dialogue comes from dia, where the dia means through, and log comes from logos, which means the word or words. So dialogue means that you're moving through something, through talking about it, through discussing it, through allowing those words to come out. And so the author puts forward this idea about problems and paradoxes, and that oftentimes we confuse those things and we treat things that aren't really problems, that are actually paradoxes, we treat them like problems. So I would say that one of the paradoxes in life is, and by the way, a paradox is something that doesn't have a solution. You can't just solve it. Like a problem can be solved. A problem you can engage and you can say, we can solve this. It has an answer, it has a solution. You can work it out. A paradox is not that way. It doesn't have a solution. So one of the paradoxes in life, I would say, is like two infinitely worthy beings, like trying to live and co-create together. Like, that's a paradox because each person is infinitely valuable, has complete freedom, has ultimate responsibility. So who's to say that what you want is more important than what I want, or what I want is more important than you want? Like, this is a paradox. How do we resolve this? So, and this is like what happens in these instances where we come in with what we want to do at our pace, with what we want to have going, at the rate we want to have it, and we want to have it now. And the other person says, no, I don't want it. That's not, no. Like, and then problems happen. So that's a paradox. And the way that paradoxes get resolved, the way that they don't actually get resolved, sorry, they kind of like dissipate. So when you start engaging a paradox, paradoxes either continue to exist or they dissipate, they just go away. And how that happens in this case, and with human beings a lot of times, is through the concept of dialogue, is that you talk it out. You say, this is how I feel, this is my perspective. The other person doesn't judge, just listens, acknowledges that, and then keeps going. They share. The biggest technique in this, I would say, is the technique of asking and active listening. To be able to ask someone how they feel, include them, and then when they say it, you say it back. So when you say it back to the other person, that's when you know that you've been heard. Because when you can say it back with the same kind of emotion and understanding, then that person knows that they've been heard. So dialogue really happens in that case. So when you're dialoguing, the way to do that, again, is to be able to be willing and ready to accept other people's feelings, their thoughts, their emotions, whatever they say. Allow it to come out. Don't judge it. Don't throw it away. There it is. Accept it. You could say it back and then say, this is how I feel about it. This is my perspective. This is what I see. And through that process, if you just kind of allow that to happen, then things will start to resolve. The paradox will start to get resolved. Another way that I see this happen a lot is through a tool that is often called just like share your hopes and fears, or what you're most excited about and what you're most afraid of. That's a way of asking and a question that you can use to really get at that dialogue technique of, hey, when it comes to this thing, like, what are you most excited about? And let people just share. And what are you most afraid of? And then people just share that. And that can be just person to person. It can be in a group of people. But what that does is it really facilitates dialogue. And you capture those thoughts. You could share them. You can write them up. You can get those out. So again, you could do that with a child, a spouse, anyone. That's a great way to get dialogue going. What are you most excited about? What are you most afraid of? And you could do it like with a particular situation, or even with like that particular problem that you're having with that person. Again, let it come out. Don't judge it. Don't try to steer people in a way. Just let it all come out. Okay, so the second tool of nonviolent communication. Super awesome. Super awesome. Admittedly, it's a challenging practice to put it into place because it will shift your thinking dramatically. It's not the way that most people are raised. It's not the way that most people are taught to engage in life or with other cultures or with other people. So it can be a big challenge. Now, that being said, it is a phenomenal tool. Why I like it so much is because it hits on some of the core principles that I believe must be in place for rising of consciousness, for an elevated understanding, and for going to the next level of us as human beings, like living and co-creating together. So 3 of those things are to stop ignoring, so to leave ignorance, to take personal responsibility, ultimate responsibility, and to realize that you have infinite worth and everybody else has infinite worth. So 3 of those principles, nonviolent communication, like hits on big time. It's phenomenal. So first, stop ignoring. So what it does is it teaches you, and it requires you to stop ignoring your own feelings and to stop ignoring other people's feelings. And that when you engage in something, when you communicate with other people, to surface and talk about, I feel scared when you do X, Y, Z, or I feel sad when you do X, Y, Z. And just even phrasing it that way, you can see that you're saying, I feel scared. You're taking responsibility for your own feelings. I feel this. At the same time, talking to the other person and saying, when you do this. So you're not placing blame on them. You're connecting the dots of cause and effect. And you're not even asking that person to change, but you're bringing higher levels of awareness. Oh, sorry, I had a little notification there. I had to clear that out. So you're taking responsibility for your own feelings, and you're illuminating to that other person to say, when you do this, you're not asking them to change, but you're making them aware. And then through that process, it also, again, hits on that infinite worth piece, because then you're saying, like, this is how I feel, this is what you do. that is a stance or is a mindset that puts both people into those states of infinite worth. I have infinite worth, you have infinite worth. I'm taking responsibility for my own actions, and you have the opportunity to take responsibility for your actions. And then I'm not going to ignore the way I feel, and I'm not going to ignore that when you do this, this is what happens. Okay, so I think that is a phenomenal tool. And if you get into nonviolent communication, there's all kinds of techniques and things that Marshall Rosenberg will talk about. He's a phenomenal teacher, so great. So pick up that book. He has videos on YouTube that are awesome too. So last thing I'll say about nonviolent communication is that it will also require you, like all of this stuff does too, but it will require you to slow down and with other people, which is great. Like, you slow down, and it's going to take some time to work through this stuff, because like it doesn't just snap into place. But through this process of slowing down with people, being willing to engage with them in these types of communications, will build those relationships, and will start to resolve some of those conflicts that happen, some of the pain that happens, because it will surface it and give you some tools and techniques to dive in and deal with it. Okay, so to kind of do a big old recap here, a lens that you can look at the problems that exist in relationships with other people. That lens that you can look at those through is through the lens of tempo and tempo changes, the way that you dance through life with other people, and how that oftentimes requires you to speed up or slow down to engage them, and to be able to understand their tempos and their rhythms and what they want to go do in life, and what's going on with them, what's going on with you, and to realize that many times friction and problems that occur are due to problems with tempo, matching tempo with other people, and due to problems with lack of empathizing and being able to perceive where other people are at with that way of living life. Being able to perceive what their tempos are and how they want to go dance through the day. All right, and then 2 tools that you can use to be able to get at that and resolve some of those things is dialogue. So the 2 tools are dialogue and nonviolent communication. And those are those techniques and all those tools and everything come from 2 books that I've read. Those books are On Dialogue by David Bohm and Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. If you put those 2 tools into place, you also look at your relationships and co-creating with people as tempo and as a dance, and you're co-creating in life with them, then I fully believe that as you put these things into practice, you will see your relationships improve, you will see living life get better, and you'll begin to resolve the pain that comes from the problems that arise just in everyday life with 2 or more human beings that are powerful and infinitely worthy in their own regards. And you'll be able to solve some of those pains of living with loved ones and your friends and people that you want to live life with. All right, so I hope you can put these things into practice. I hope they work for you. All right, have a great day.